time. Let's talk now to Nick Freeman, who's, of course, criminal lawyer, criminal defence lawyer, author, commentator, also known as Mr. Loophole. Nick, a very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, you and I speak on a reasonably regular basis about a bunch of stuff, including the limitations that we would like to see put on certain devices and things that you can ride around London on and various other parts of the country. I see, for example, the other day they had their first prosecution of somebody being drunk in charge of one of those electric scooters.
Yeah, one of the e-scooters. Well, the thing about e-scooters is they're covered by exactly the same law as motor vehicles and lorries. So there's no difference. I think the problem is that the public aren't aware of that. They get on thinking that they're bicycles, and they're not. So you have points, you have endorsements, you have disqualification, you can have a community penalty, and you can have prison. So, if you tragically kill someone or seriously injure someone, you'd be on trial at the Crown Court and be looking at an extremely lengthy custodial sentence if you were convicted. And people just don't realise, because obviously they've not been educated in relation to exactly what they are. They're on a trial period at the moment, and I don't think the government have made people aware of the legal necessities and the law behind these things. They're just saying, look, you can rent them for a period of time. It's a trial basis, and no one's actually invested in actually telling people what you can and can't do. And
there's an ever-increasing number of them as well on the streets, isn't there?
Well, legal and illegal. I mean, basically, unless they're hired, they're illegal. So you're not allowed to go and buy them and use them on a public road or in a public place. You can use them on private land. And, of course, there's a huge distinction because of the speed. I think the speed for the rental ones is about 12.5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
The other ones, the ones that are purchased, can get up to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people go very, very quickly on them. Well, speaking of death traps, let's talk a little bit about the coroner's verdict the other day in the case of the smart motorway tragedy, where smart motorways, I think you and I have agreed in the past, are absolutely anything but smart, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, there's now officially been called death traps, and tragically there have been numerous cases. And what's paramount, of course, is safety, isn't it? Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, realised some time ago that there was serious problems. Public confidence had been shattered, and he called for what he calls a stock take. That was last March. It was March 2020, 12th of March, he released an 18-point package to try and address the problems. And what he concluded was, and this is quite interesting, and I have to say I don't agree with it at all, because he said in some areas they're safer, and he highlighted, for example, there's less tailgating. He commissioned a report, so he's obviously acting on the information received. He says there's less tailgating. Well, my experience, and I'm on them all the time, is actually everyone tailgates because you're stuck, behind somebody in close proximity. You can't accelerate past them. You can't get away from them. So literally, instead of a few vehicles tailgating, everyone now tailgates because you can't you can't get away. He says that there are less vehicles now speeding. Well, actually, there are more vehicles speeding than ever before. And he also said they're safer in the respect that vehicles drift less. They don't wander into other lanes. Well, certainly my experience is the lanes are too narrow, and vehicles, particularly large vehicles, that can barely fit in the lanes, are often moving over into another lane, and there's very little space for the car to go. But the real point in my view is the safety element, and Grant Shapps wants to get rid of what he calls this dynamic hard shoulder, and that's the near side lane being made into a hard shoulder when there's an accident and when something happens, a breakdown or an accident or someone's stranded or something like that, and they want to make it into a hard shoulder. He wants to get rid of that. In my view, we need to have a permanent hard shoulder, because unfortunately people, they break down, they run out of petrol, there might be minor collisions. There are a whole host of different reasons why we need that. And at the moment, if you're driving on a smart motorway, in relation to most of them, if you have a problem, there's nowhere for you to go.
Right. And that's not acceptable, is it? I mean, a friend of mine had an accident on some black ice on the M25 recently, and it was very early in the morning. It took the police an hour to come out and remove the car, which was stuck basically in the fast lane.
And what's that person supposed to do? I mean, you're not always going to be in the near side lane.
Right.
And, to try and imagine you're in a live lane and you come to a halt, And so what Grant Shapps is saying is, well, we now need to have a system, he's calling it a stopped speed detection system, that will warn the people who operate the cameras within 20 seconds. So he's now talking about unraveling a new system. This is going to take 3 years before it's working. And what I find astonishing is, how could you have a system called a smart motorway where you have a system of vehicle detection that is woefully inadequate, and there is nowhere to escape? So, he also thinks, well, we need to have lay-bys every 3/4 of a mile. That's fine, but you still got to get to that.
Yeah, well, how are you supposed to get there? You're supposed to push the car to a lay-by. I mean, that's ridiculous.
You just cannot be in a live lane on a motorway. You've got to have somewhere that you can escape to immediately. And in my view, you need the only solution is a permanent hard shoulder.
Yes.
What's happened with smart motorways is that they're made on the cheap. They've not been thought through. And now what we're trying to do is play catch-up and say, well, how can we make it a bit safer? Instead of having emergency lay-bys every mile, or not even that, let's make them more regular. That is not going to solve the problem. If you, God forbid, break down on a live lane, your life is in jeopardy. And the point is this now, they've been called death traps. I've said they've been dangerous for a long time, as have many other people. And Highways England need to act now, and they need to say, right, until everything is done to make these safe, they owe us a duty of care. We need to close the near side lane and make that a permanent hard shoulder, so that if somebody breaks down, it's not a dynamic lane, it is a permanent hard shoulder until something happens which makes these safe, because at the moment they are not fit for purpose.
No, absolutely right.
Let's say safety is the most important thing, and to have unravel hundreds of millions of pounds a new road system and call them smart motorways, and then they're called death traps. Who is running this system? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? It's really astonishing.
It is shameful. Nick, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Nick Freeman there talking about why smart motorways don't work. They should not be in existence, and they should be ended and shut down. Proper hard shoulders are what is required. Even the coroners of this country are now saying that they are death traps. If it involves having to widen the roads, then so be it.